A black woman entered the hospital, her body contorted in agony. But instead of receiving help, the white doctor took one look at her and declared with cold finality, "It's just anxiety." Moments later, she collapsed in the waiting room, a silent testament to his neglect, while the world looked on with indifference. But her husband had just arrived. And when that man walked through the doors and saw his wife, Yvette Prieto Jordan, unconscious on the cold hospital floor, what he did next would ensure that Viridian Summit Medical Center and the world would never forget his name, Michael Jordan. Before we delve into this powerful story of justice and a love that could move mountains, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. Your engagement helps us bring these vital narratives to the forefront. Yvette Prieto Jordan, a woman who moved through the world with an innate elegance and a quiet, formidable strength, was in her sun-drenched home office reviewing designs for an upcoming charity gala when the pain first struck. It wasn't a dull ache or a fleeting cramp. It was a vicious, searing bolt of lightning that shot through her abdomen, stealing her breath and buckling her knees. It felt like a venomous serpent coiling and twisting deep within her, its fangs sinking into her very core. The color drained from her face, replaced by a ghastly, clammy pallor. Her heart began to pound a frantic, chaotic rhythm against her ribs, a wild drumbeat of pure terror. This wasn't just pain. It was an alarm, a primal scream from her body that something was catastrophically wrong. Without a moment's hesitation, Yvette knew she needed a hospital. Not just any hospital, but the best. She grabbed her car keys, her movements jerky and uncoordinated, and drove herself to Viridian Summit Medical Center. It was the city's crown jewel of healthcare, a gleaming monument to medical innovation with a reputation as pristine as its polished marble floors. But beneath the surface of its prestige, whispers slithered through the city's elite circles, rumors of a deeply ingrained culture of elitism, a place where the quality of care was often measured not by the severity of the ailment, but by the weight of one's wallet and the color of one's skin. Pushing through the heavy glass doors, the sterile antiseptic smell assaulted her senses, and a profound chill, unrelated to the building's temperature, seeped into her bones. The automated announcements that echoed from unseen speakers felt cold and impersonal, a stark reminder that within these walls she was not a person, but a case file, a number waiting to be called. At the brightly lit reception desk, Yvette clutched the counter to keep from collapsing. The receptionist, a woman in her late 40s named Brenda, looked up. Her nameplate read Brenda, Patient Intake Coordinator, but her expression conveyed the weary authority of a gatekeeper. She gave Yvette a swift, dismissive glance, her eyes cataloging Yvette's simple, yet elegant, sweatsuit chosen for comfort in her panicked Russian, the absence of any ostentatious jewelry. An assumption clicked into place in Brenda's mind, as solid and unmovable as a locked door. Just as Yvette opened her mouth to speak, a well-dressed white woman, radiating an aura of casual wealth, swept up to the counter. The exhaustion on Brenda's face melted away, replaced by a practiced, sycophantic smile. "Mrs. Davenport, so good to see you again," Brenda chirped, her voice dripping with deference. "Dr. Sterling is ready for you. Let me just get you checked in. Please, have a seat right over there, and we'll have someone with you in a moment." The entire exchange was seamless, a well-oiled transaction of privilege. Yvette watched, a fresh wave of pain mixing with a growing sense of dread. When Brenda finally turned her attention back, the warmth in her voice had vanished, replaced by a flat, impatient tone. "Can I help you?" Fighting through the agony, Yvette's voice was a strained whisper. I have a severe pain in my abdomen. It's hard to breathe. My heart is racing." Brenda's fingers tapped rhythmically on her keyboard, a staccato of indifference. "Abdominal pain," she mumbled, not making eye contact. "Claims shortness of breath. Appears anxious." She didn't look up from her screen as she gestured vaguely toward the waiting area. "The ER is very busy right now. Take a seat. We'll call you when a room is available. Your symptoms don't appear to be as critical as some of our other cases." In Brenda's mind, the unofficial policies of Viridian Summit passed down through knowing glances and quiet conversations, were clear. The words of Dr. Alan Miller, the head of the emergency department, echoed in her memory from a staff meeting just last week. We have to be realistic. A certain demographic tends to exaggerate for narcotics or to jump the queue. It's our job to be discerning and protect our resources for the patients who truly need them. Brenda felt a flicker of self-satisfaction. She wasn't being cruel. She was being efficient. She was protecting the hospital. The receptionist's cold dismissal felt like a physical blow. The pain intensified, a white-hot poker twisting in her gut, and a terrifying tightness constricted her chest. Her legs trembled, threatening to give out from under her. "But I'm in so much pain," she pleaded, her voice cracking, tears of desperation welling in her eyes. "I feel like I'm going to pass out. Please, can't you see?" Brenda's gaze remained fixed on her monitor. "I've made a note of your symptoms. You will have to wait your turn like everyone else." She turned away, deliberately ignoring the small, almost imperceptible tremor in Yvette's hands, the sheen of cold sweat on her forehead. Defeated, Yvette stumbled towards the waiting area, her body shaking uncontrollably. Each name called over the intercom that wasn't hers was another twist of the knife. She sank into a hard plastic chair, the world around her a blur of indifferent faces and muted television screens. She felt utterly, terrifyingly alone, a solitary island of agony in a sea of detached humanity. She pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling, and sent a short, desperate text to her husband, Michael. "At Viridian Summit. Terrible pain. They're making me wait. I'm scared." She didn't want to worry him, not when he was in the middle of a major negotiation for his latest business venture. But the fear was a living thing, choking her. From across the waiting room, another pair of eyes watched with growing concern. Nurse Maria Sanchez, a veteran of the ER for over 20 years, was on her break. She had seen everything, from true emergencies to minor complaints, and her instincts were screaming that the woman who had just collapsed into the chair was in serious trouble. She had seen the way Brenda had dismissed her, the subtle curl of her lip, the immediate fawning attention given to Mrs. Davenport. It was a pattern she had seen play out countless times, and it made her stomach churn. Maria walked over to Brenda's desk. "That woman who just came in," she said, her voice low but firm. "She looks like she's in shock. Her color is terrible. Are you sure she should be waiting?" Brenda bristled, her authority challenged. "I've triaged her, Maria. Dr. Miller's guidelines are very clear. She's stable. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." Maria knew it was a losing battle. The system was designed to protect itself, and Brenda was one of its most loyal soldiers. But she made a mental note. She would check on the woman herself as soon as she could. An hour crawled by, an eternity of escalating agony for Yvette. Finally, her name was called. She was led to a small, sterile examination room, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant. She shivered, the cold of the room seeping into her bones. A few minutes later, the door swung open, and Dr. Alan Miller entered. He was a man in his late 50s, with a mane of silver hair, a tailored white coat, and an air of unshakable arrogance. He held Yvette's chart, his eyes scanning the receptionist's brief, biased notes before they flickered over Yvette herself. In his mind, the diagnosis was already 90% complete. Medicaid case? No, probably just basic insurance. Dressed down, anxious, complaining of abdominal pain. Classic presentation of a time waster. He prided himself on his realism, a self-serving justification for a deep-seated prejudice that saw patients not as individuals, but as stereotypes. "So, you're having some stomach pain," he began, his tone patronizing, his eyes focused on the chart rather than on her. "It's more than that," Yvette said, her voice trembling but clear. "It's a sharp, tearing pain. I'm dizzy, and my heart won't slow down. I've never felt anything like this." Dr. Miller grunted, a sound of profound disinterest. "Lie back." He placed his cold stethoscope on her abdomen, pressing down in a few random spots with perfunctory pressure. Yvette let out an involuntary gasp of pain. "Does it hurt there?" he asked, his voice bored. It hurts everywhere, she whispered. He straightened up, a self-satisfied smirk touching his lips. He had confirmed his initial suspicion: diffuse, non-specific pain, a classic sign of anxiety manifesting as physical symptoms. He turned his back to her and began writing in her chart. Yvette felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. She was invisible. She was a nuisance. After a moment, Dr. Miller turned back, his expression one of finality. As I suspected, there's nothing acutely wrong with you. You're experiencing a panic attack, which is causing gastritis. It's very common in certain populations. The stress manifests physically. He paused, his gaze sweeping over her with a look that was both clinical and deeply personal. I'm going to prescribe a mild sedative to help you calm down and an antacid for the stomach discomfort. You should go home, rest, and try to manage your stress levels. The words hit Yvette with the force of a physical assault. Excessive anxiety, unstable psychological state. She was a successful businesswoman, a philanthropist, a wife, and a mother. But in this room, to this man, she was nothing more than a hysterical woman of color. A surge of adrenaline cut through the fog of her pain. "Doctor," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength, "I am not having a panic attack. I know my body. There is something seriously wrong with me. Please, just run some tests. An ultrasound, a CT scan, anything." Dr. Miller's face hardened. The polite mask of professionalism slipped, revealing the ugly contempt beneath. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I have been a doctor for 30 years. I think I know the difference between a real medical emergency and a case of nerves. We have truly sick people waiting for this room. You are wasting valuable resources." He ripped a prescription from his pad and thrust it at her. "Take this to the pharmacy. Now, if you'll excuse me." He turned and walked out, closing the door behind him, leaving Yvette alone in the suffocating silence, her pleas echoing in the empty room. The dismissal, the blatant racism, was a pain almost as sharp as the one in her abdomen. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. The room began to spin, the white walls closing in on her. A wave of nausea washed over her, and she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she was dying. With the last of her strength, she stumbled out of the room, clinging to the wall for support. The waiting area swam before her eyes. She saw Nurse Maria rushing towards her, her face a mask of alarm. But it was too late. Yvette's legs gave out completely. She collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving linoleum floor. Her vision tunneled, the sounds of the hospital fading into a dull roar. Her hand, acting on pure instinct, clutched her phone. Her thumb, shaking violently, found the contact she had pinned to the top of her screen. The phone rang once, in a silent office across town. Michael Jordan, who had been staring at his phone, willing it to ring, saw his wife's picture flash on the screen. He answered before the second ring. "Yvette? Baby, what's wrong?" He heard a faint gasping sound, a desperate fight for air. "Michael!" Her voice was a ghost of itself. A thread of sound stretched to its breaking point. They won't listen. I think." The line went dead. A primal fear, cold and absolute, seized Michael Jordan. The world around him dissolved. The multi-million-dollar deal, the board members, the panoramic city view from his office, it all vanished. There was only the silence on the other end of the line, a silence that screamed of catastrophe. He was out of his chair and through the door before his COO could even ask what was wrong. "My wife," was all he said, his voice a low growl that stopped everyone cold. He didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, his long legs devouring them two at a time. He burst out into the street, flagging the first taxi he saw, his towering presence impossible to ignore. "Viridian Summit Medical Center," he commanded, his voice tight with a terrifying calm. "And don't stop for anything." The 15-minute drive felt like a lifetime. He called Yvette's phone again and again. No answer. He called the hospital's main line, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "My wife, Yvette Jordan, is in your emergency room. I need to speak to her now. The operator, flustered, put him on hold. He arrived at the hospital not like a celebrity, but like a storm front, a gathering force of nature. He didn't need to announce himself. His 6'6" frame, radiating an aura of controlled fury, parted the crowds in the lobby like the Red Sea. He saw the commotion first, a small cluster of nurses, a security guard speaking into his radio, a sense of panicked, disorganized activity. And then he saw her, his wife, his Yvette, sprawled on the cold, sterile floor by the reception desk. Her face was ashen, her lips tinged with blue. Her elegant sweatsuit was now just a covering for a body that was terrifyingly still. Nurse Maria was performing chest compressions, her face grim with determination. The world stopped. For a split second, the legendary composure of Michael Jordan shattered, and all that was left was a husband watching his world crumble. A raw, guttural sound escaped his throat, a sound of pure agony that silenced the entire emergency room. He was at her side in an instant, dropping to his knees, his hand going to her face. It was cold. "Yvette," he choked out, his voice breaking. "Baby, I'm here." His gaze, burning with a grief that was rapidly turning to white-hot rage, swept over the scene. He saw the terrified face of the receptionist, Brenda, who was standing frozen behind her desk. He saw Dr. Miller, who had been casually summoned from his office, approaching with an air of detached annoyance. Michael's eyes, the same eyes that had stared down opponents and pressure cooker moments with unflinching intensity, locked onto the doctor. "You," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, a low vibration that was more menacing than any shout. "Are you her doctor?" Dr. Miller, recognizing the face but not yet grasping the magnitude of the situation, nodded curtly. "I am? And you are?" "I'm the husband of the woman you left to die on the floor," Michael said, each word a perfectly weighted stone of accusation. The hospital director, a portly, balding man named Mr. Thompson, came scurrying over, his face slick with sweat. "Sir, please, let's calm down. We're doing everything we can." "Calm down?" Michael's voice rose, not in a yell, but in a crescendo of disbelief and fury. "You want me to calm down? My wife texted me an hour ago. She told me she was in agony. She told me she was scared. And you," his eyes drilled into Dr. Miller, "you told her it was anxiety. You sent her away." He looked at Brenda, whose face had gone from white to a mottled gray. "And you made her wait. Did you even look at her? Did you see she was in distress?" Nurse Maria, without missing a beat in her compressions, spoke up, her voice clear and strong. "I saw her, sir. I told the intake coordinator she was in critical condition. I was ignored." A gurney finally arrived. As they lifted Yvette onto it, Michael's hand never left hers. He walked beside them as they rushed towards the trauma bay, his towering frame a silent, avenging shadow. He stopped at the door, turning to face the director and Dr. Miller, who had followed, their faces a mixture of fear and dawning horror. "This man," Michael said, pointing a finger at Dr. Miller, a gesture the world knew well, "does not touch my wife. He does not work in this hospital. As of this second, he is fired." He then turned his gaze to Brenda. "And so are you. Pack your things. Get out." He looked at the stunned hospital director. "My lawyers will be here in 10 minutes. My PR team in 15. You have allowed a culture of arrogant, racist neglect to fester in this building, and it almost cost my wife her life. We are not going to discuss a settlement. We are going to discuss how I am going to dismantle your institution, piece by piece. Now, save my wife." With that, he turned and disappeared into the trauma room, leaving a maelstrom of panic and ruin in his wake. The legend had arrived, not as a player, but as a king defending his queen, and the walls of Viridian Summit Medical Center had already begun to crumble. The minutes that followed were a blur of controlled chaos. The hospital's best trauma team, the very specialists who are usually reserved for visiting dignitaries and the city's wealthiest patrons, descended on the ER. Yvette was intubated, lines were inserted, and she was rushed for an emergency CT scan. Michael stood in a corner of the room, a silent, imposing statue of grief and rage, his eyes never leaving his wife's face. The diagnosis came back, and it was catastrophic. Yvette had suffered a ruptured aortic aneurysm, a ticking time bomb in her chest that Dr. Miller, in his arrogant prejudice, had dismissed as a case of nerves. The delay in treatment had been devastating. What could have been a high-risk but manageable surgery was now a desperate fight for survival against overwhelming odds. As Yvette was wheeled into the operating theater, Michael's team arrived. They were a sharp, efficient unit of lawyers in crisp suits and a PR guru with a phone permanently attached to her ear. They moved with the precision of a special forces team, their mission clear: control the narrative, secure the evidence, and prepare for war. The lawyers immediately served the hospital with a preservation order for all records, emails, text messages, and security footage related to Yvette's visit. The PR head, a formidable woman named Jessica, was already drafting a press release, her words carefully chosen to be both factual and explosive. The story of a beloved public figure's wife being left to die by a prestigious hospital due to racial bias was about to ignite a national firestorm. Meanwhile, Dr. Alan Miller drove home in a daze. The words, "You're fired," echoed in his head, but they felt unreal. He was Dr. Miller, a pillar of the medical community. This was a misunderstanding, a gross overreaction from a distraught husband. Famous or not, he walked into his sprawling suburban home, expecting sympathy from his wife, but found only fury. The true reckoning, however, came from his 17-year-old daughter, Emily. She was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror as she stared at her phone. The news had already broken on social media, a wildfire of speculation and outrage. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What did you do?" "It's not what it looks like, Emily," he began, the defensive words tasting like ash in his mouth. The woman was exaggerating her. "The woman?" Emily interrupted, her voice rising with disbelief. She stood up and ran to her room, returning with a large scrapbook. It was her Bible, a collection of clippings and photos of her fashion icons. She slammed it down on the table, opened to a page she had meticulously designed. It was covered with pictures of Yvette Prieto Jordan from various galas and events. Yvette, looking radiant and stylish. Yvette, a model of grace and philanthropy. "Her name is Yvette Jordan, Dad," Emily sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "She's a design consultant for the Children's Defense Fund. She's one of the people I admire most in the world. And you? You did this to her?" Seeing his daughter's idol, the woman he had dismissed as just another anxious case, staring back at him from the pages of his own child's scrapbook, the carefully constructed walls of his prejudice and self-delusion shattered into a million pieces. This wasn't an anonymous patient. This was a person his own daughter revered. The weight of his failure, personal and professional, crashed down on him with suffocating force. He had not only failed a patient, he had failed his own child. Back at the hospital, the board of directors was in an emergency meeting, their faces ashen. They weren't just dealing with a lawsuit, they were facing Michael Jordan. He was more than a celebrity. He was a global brand, a symbol of excellence and fierce determination. He had the wealth, the influence, and the sheer force of will to not just sue them, but to erase them. Hours later, after a grueling surgery, the lead surgeon emerged from the OR. He found Michael still standing where he had left him, his vigil unbroken. "She's alive," the surgeon said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "It was touch and go. The next 48 hours are critical, but she's a fighter." A wave of relief, so profound it almost brought him to his knees, washed over Michael. He allowed himself a single, shuddering breath. The fight for his wife's life was not over, but the war on the institution that had failed her was just beginning. The next morning, with Yvette stable but still in a medically induced coma in the ICU, Michael Jordan met with the hospital's board of directors. They came armed with apologies, settlement offers, and promises of internal reviews. Michael listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When they had finished, he leaned forward, placing his hands on the polished boardroom table. "Your apologies are worthless," he said, his voice a low, chilling calm. "Your money is an insult, and your internal reviews are a joke. You had a cancer in this hospital, a cancer of prejudice and neglect, and you let it grow. You're not going to fix it. I am." The board members exchanged confused glances. Mr. Thompson, the director, cleared his throat. "Mr. Jordan, we are prepared to offer a substantial donation to a charity of your choice. We will of course cover all of Mrs. Jordan's medical expenses." "You think this is about money?" Michael cut him off, a flicker of fire in his eyes. "I have money. What I don't have is a guarantee that what happened to my wife won't happen to another black woman tomorrow, or a Hispanic man, or anyone you deem less than." He stood up, his height dominating the room. "So here's my offer. It's not a negotiation. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to drag your names through the mud for years, even though my lawyers assure me we would win spectacularly. I'm going to do something far more effective." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. "I'm buying this hospital. I will be your majority shareholder by the end of the month, and once I own it, I'm going to tear it down to the studs, not the bricks and mortar, but the culture. I'm going to rebuild it from the ground up into a place that provides the best care to everyone, regardless of their zip code, their insurance plan, or the color of their skin. You will sell it to me, or I will spend the next decade of my life personally ensuring that the name Viridian Summit becomes a national synonym for racist malpractice. Your choice." The stunned silence that followed was the sound of a paradigm shifting. The board knew they weren't being threatened. They were being handed their only lifeline. The king hadn't just come to win the battle, he had come to conquer the entire kingdom. 3 months later, the sign outside the hospital came down. In its place, a new one was erected, bearing the name the Yvette Jordan Health and Research Center. At a packed press conference, Michael Jordan, with a recovered and radiant Yvette by his side, stood at a podium and addressed the world. He didn't speak of anger or revenge. He spoke of change. He announced the complete overhaul of the hospital's administration and the establishment of a new, independent civilian oversight board. He introduced what he called the Yvette Protocol, a revolutionary new patient intake and diagnostic system developed in partnership with leading experts on medical bias at Johns Hopkins and Harvard. It was a system built on a simple, radical idea: believe the patient. The protocol included mandatory, ongoing, implicit bias training for every single employee, from surgeons to janitors. Nurse Maria Sanchez, who had been promoted to the head of nursing, stood beside them, a symbol of the new culture they were building. She was tasked with implementing the protocol and fostering an environment where compassion and advocacy were not just encouraged, but required. Dr. Miller's medical license had been permanently revoked. He was a broken man, his name now a cautionary tale in medical schools. Brenda, the receptionist, was working in a call center, the memory of Yvette's collapsing form a ghost that haunted her quiet moments. The story of what happened at Viridian Summit became a catalyst for national reform. Other hospitals, fearing similar reckonings, began to re-examine their own policies and prejudices. Months after the press conference, Yvette and Michael walked the halls of the transformed hospital. The air felt different, lighter, warmer. The staff was more diverse, their interactions with patients marked by a palpable sense of respect and attentiveness. They passed a room where a young Hispanic woman, clearly in pain, was surrounded by a team of doctors, their heads bent together, listening intently to her every word. Yvette squeezed Michael's hand, her eyes shining with tears. But this time, they were tears of gratitude. "You didn't just save me that day," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Michael looked down at her, his love for her a tangible presence. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "We did," he corrected her gently. "We did." As they continued their walk, they were no longer just a husband and wife. They were a testament to the enduring power of love and the profound truth that sometimes the only way to heal a broken system is to have the courage to buy it, break it, and build something better in its place. Justice had been served, not in a courtroom, but in the very halls, where injustice had almost triumphed. And in doing so, they had created a legacy of hope that would outlive them both.